The Acropolis of Athens is an ancient citadel located on a rocky outcrop above the city of Athens and contains the remains of several ancient buildings of great architectural and historical significance, the most famous being the Parthenon. The word Acropolis is from the Greek words akron, akron, highest point, extremity, and polis, polis, city. The term Acropolis is generic and there are many other acropolis in Greece. During ancient times the Acropolis of Athens was known also more properly as Cecropia, after the legendary serpent man, Scrops, the supposed first Athenian king. While there is evidence that the hill was inhabited as far back as the 4th millennium BC, it was Pericles c. 495 to 429 BC, in the 5th century BC who coordinated the construction of the buildings whose present remains are the site's most important ones, including the Parthenon, the Propylaea, the Erechtheion and the Temple of Athena Nike. The Parthenon and the other buildings were seriously damaged during the 1687 siege by the Venetians during the Marine War when gunpowder being stored in the Parthenon by the Ottomans was hit by a cannonball and exploded. The entrance to the Acropolis was a monumental gateway termed the Propylaea. To the south of the entrance is the tiny Temple of Athena Nike. At the center of the Acropolis is the Parthenon or Temple of Athena Parthenos, Athena the Virgin. East of the entrance and north of the Parthenon is the temple known as the Erechtheion. South of the platform that forms the top of the Acropolis there are also the remains of the ancient, though often remodeled, Theater of Dionysus. A few hundred meters away, there is the now partially reconstructed Odeon of Herodes Atticus. All the valuable ancient artifacts are situated in the Acropolis Museum, which resides on the southern slope of the same rock, 280 meters from the Parthenon. Every 4 years, the Athenians had a festival called the Great Panathenaea that rivaled the Olympic Games in popularity. During the festival, a procession believed to be depicted on the Parthenon frieze traveled through the city via the Panathenaic Way and culminated on the Acropolis. There, a new robe of woven wool, peplos, was placed on either the statue of Athena Polias in the Erechtheion, during the annual Lesser Panathenaea, or on the statue of Athena Parthenos in the Parthenon, during the Great Panathenaea, held every 4 years. Within the later tradition of Western civilization and classical revival, the Acropolis, from at least the mid-18th century on, has often been invoked as a key symbol of the Greek legacy and of the glories of classical Greece. Most of the artifacts from the temple are housed today in the Acropolis Museum at the foot of the ancient rock. The Acropolis is located on a flattish-topped rock that rises 150 meters, 490 feet, above sea level in the city of Athens, with a surface area of about 3 hectares, 7.4 acres. While the earliest artifacts date to the Middle Neolithic era, there have been documented habitations in Attica from the early Neolithic period, 6th millennium BC. Not much is known about the architectural appearance of the Acropolis until the Archaic era. During the 7th and the 6th centuries BC, the site was controlled by Cylon during the failed Cylonian revolt, and twice by Pisistratos. Each of these were attempts directed at seizing political power by coups d'état. Apart from the Hecatompedon mentioned later, Pisistratos also built an entry gate or propylaea. Nevertheless, it seems that a 9-gate wall, the Eniopylon, had been built around the Acropolis hill and incorporating the biggest water spring, the Clepsydra, at the northwestern foot. A temple to Athena Polias, the tutelary deity of the city, was erected between 570 and 550 BC. This Doric limestone building, from which many relics survive, is referred to as the Hecatompedon, Greek for 100-footed. Parthenon, German for original Parthenon, or primitive Parthenon. Architecture or Bluebeard Temple, after the pedimental 3-bodied man-serpent sculpture, whose beards were painted dark blue. Whether this temple replaced an older one, or just a sacred precinct or altar, is not known. Probably, the Hecatompedon was built where the Parthenon now stands. Between 529 and 520 BC yet another temple was built by the Pisistratids, the Old Temple of Athena, usually referred to as the Archaios Neos ancient temple. This temple of Athena Polias was built upon the Dorfeld foundations, between the Erechtheion and the still-standing Parthenon. Archaios Neos was destroyed as part of the Achaemenid destruction of Athens during the Second Persian invasion of Greece during 480 to 479 BC. However, the temple was probably reconstructed during 454 BC, since the treasury of the Delian League was transferred in its opisthotamos. The temple may have been burnt down during 406-405 BC, as Xenophon mentions that the old temple of Athena was set afire. Pausanias does not mention it in his 2nd century AD description of Greece. Around 500 BC, the Hecatompedon was dismantled to make place for a new grander building, the Older Parthenon, often referred to as the Pre-Parthenon, Early Parthenon. For this reason, Athenians decided to stop the construction of the Olympian temple, which was connoted with the tyrant Pisistratos and his sons, and, instead, used the Piraeus limestone destined for the Olympian to build the Older Parthenon. In order to accommodate the new temple, the south part of the summit was cleared, made level by adding some 8,002-ton blocks of limestone, a foundation 11 meters 36 feet deep at some points, and the rest was filled with soil kept in place by the retaining wall. However, after the victorious Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, the plan was revised and marble was used instead. The limestone phase of the building is referred to as Pre-Parthenon I and the marble phase as Pre-Parthenon II. In 485 BC, construction stalled to save resources as Xerxes became king of Persia and war seemed imminent. The older Parthenon was still under construction when the Persians invaded and sacked the city in 480 BC. The building was burned and looted, along with the ancient temple and practically everything else on the rock. After the Persian crisis had subsided, the Athenians incorporated many architectural parts of the unfinished temple, unfluted column drums, triglyphs, metapiece, etc., into the newly built northern curtain wall of the Acropolis, where they served as a prominent war memorial, and can still be seen today. The devastated site was cleared of debris, statuary, cult objects, religious offerings, and unsalvageable architectural members were buried ceremoniously in several deeply dug pits on the hill, serving conveniently as a fill for the artificial plateau created around the classic Parthenon. This Persian debris was the richest archaeological deposit excavated on the Acropolis by 1890. After winning at Eurymedon during 468 BC, Cimon and Themistocles ordered the reconstruction of the southern and northern walls of the Acropolis. Most of the major temples, including the Parthenon, were rebuilt by order of Pericles during the so-called Golden Age of Athens, 460 to 430 BC. Phidias, an Athenian sculptor, and Ectinus and Callicrates, two famous architects, were responsible for the reconstruction. During 437 BC, Nicephorus started building the Propylaea, a monumental gate at the western end of the Acropolis with Doric columns of Pentelic marble, built partly upon the old Propylaea of Pisistratos. These colonnades were almost finished during 432 BC and had two wings, the northern one decorated with paintings by Polygnotus. About the same time, south of the Propylaea, building started on the small Ionic temple of Athena Nike in Pentelic marble with tetrastyle porches, preserving the essentials of Greek temple design. After an interruption caused by the Peloponnesian War, the temple was finished during the time of Nicias' peace, between 421 BC and 409 BC. During the Hellenistic and Roman periods, many of the existing buildings in the area of the Acropolis were repaired, due to damage from age, and occasionally, war. Monuments to foreign kings were erected, notably those of the Attalid kings of Pergamon Attalus II, in front of the NW corner of the Parthenon, and Eumens II, in front of the Propylaea. These were rededicated during the early Roman Empire to Augustus or Claudius, uncertain, and Agrippa, respectively. Eumens was also responsible for constructing a stoa on the south slope, not unlike that of Attalus in the Agora below. During the Julio-Claudian period, the Temple of Rome and Augustus, a small, round edifice, about 23 meters from the Parthenon, was to be the last significant ancient construction on the summit of the rock. Around the same time, on the north slope, in a cave next to the one dedicated to Pan since the classical period, a sanctuary was founded where the archons dedicated to Apollo on assuming office. During 161 AD, on the south slope, the Roman Herodes Atticus built his grand amphitheater or Odeon. It was destroyed by the invading Herulians a century later but was reconstructed during the 1950s. During the 3rd century, under threat from a Herulian invasion, repairs were made to the Acropolis walls, and the Bullae Gate was constructed to restrict entrance in front of the Propylaea, thus returning the Acropolis to use as a fortress. The sanctuary of Zeus Polius was a walled open-air sanctuary dedicated to Zeus Polius, city protector, around 500 BC on the Acropolis of Athens, sited to the Erechtheions east. None of its foundations have been discovered and its trapezoid plan and many entrances have been worked out from rock cuttings on the Acropolis. The eastern area of the sanctuary is thought to have housed the oxen for the annual bouphonia or ox sacrificing. Its main entrance had a pediment.